And I would say an organism is a collection of parts that work together for the good of the whole. A corpse no longer has that property.
And I'm lung.
Okay, but I mean, neither does a single cell organism. It can't work to do anything absent
How does it grow in the womb?
By getting nutrients from the mother. The mother's body is probably doing more at that point.
But that's the same as you and I. When we go to In-N-Out and we eat food, we got to do that to keep growing and developing. It doesn't have to be In-N-Out, but we need nutrients and environment to continue developing also.
Yeah, but I think there's a bit of a difference. When I eat a cheeseburger, my body doesn't become a cheeseburger.
I mean, what the fuck? Hey, what's up YouTube? We're back with another video on a topic that we've tackled before, but with a twist. We'll discuss Destiny's abortion stance again, but we'll also dive a bit into morality to determine where subjectivity ends and objectivity begins. Enjoy!
So I don't think that it's consciousness that makes us valuable. What makes us valuable is that we're members of a kind, of a rational kind, and every member of that kind has equal intrinsic value.
I don't agree with this approach because the notion of intrinsic value suggests a third-party emitter, as if we are imbued with value by something outside of ourselves, like nature, an undiscovered law of the universe, an external force, or even a godlike entity. In reality, humans attribute value to themselves under the guise of some form of quid pro quo. We agree to value each other because we share the same reality and are social creatures hoping to coexist in peace. To use John Rawls' veil of ignorance, first, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive liberty compatible with similar liberty for others. Second, social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are both A. reasonably expected to be to everyone's advantage, and B. attached to positions and offices open to all. Under the morality banner, this would sound something like, create a system as if you're not born yet and not knowing what you'll be born as. At a minimum, you will create a system that values human life equally, no matter the race, social norms and predilections, physical appearance, or any other factors, because that increases the chance of you surviving in the said system. So, it's more of a pragmatic approach than a quasi-religious one, as the notion of intrinsic value suggests.
I think another good jumping off point is, when do you each believe that personhood begins?
Between that 20 to 28 week point, whenever there's a part where all of the structures in the brain are in place and then they begin to communicate with each other such that you would have some conscious experience. I would say that's your personhood.
Okay.
I've already discussed this point in my first video, but it doesn't hurt to read it.
Just reiterate that, man. Man, you and already reiterated. Reiterate that shit. I ain't reiterate. Man, reiterate. You can't even say the goddamn word. Say reiterate. Reiterate.
Reiterate. It doesn't hurt to reiterate it. So, Destiny is treating consciousness and thus personhood as if it's something magical that just pops in the fetus's brain at a given microsecond. Before that, there's no consciousness, and after that, there is. Which is why he uses the words personhood appears, which suggests some type of instant emergence. In reality, consciousness doesn't appear, but it forms. It is a gradual process that begins at the moment of conception, when the hardware begins to form. The already formed consciousness is also a phenomenon with degrees. The consciousness of a 20-week-old is different than that of a newborn, a 5-year-old, and a 30-year-old. You can't say that you protect the brain
whenever all of the structures in the brain are in place and then they begin to communicate with each other.
But you won't protect the brain before that. But whatever.
Why is death bad? I think most people agree that death is bad because it's deprivational. It deprives us of something. What makes death bad for humans is it deprives a human of unique experiences. Like if an infant dies, they lose a future like ours.
Do you find that when you use that argument of future experience, can you run into trouble with people challenging you that that future experience might be horrible enough such that it could actually justify an abortion? So, for instance, let's say in the case of like, I think Tay-Sachs disease is a really rough one where I think children can die, I think often before the age of 5, right?
Right.
If your defense of abortion is bad because it's depriving somebody of a future experience, I think baked into that assumption is that the future experience is on a whole like a net positive, right?
Right.
So doesn't that kind of make your point, that point, like conditional on a positive future experience, which would justify the pro-choice argument of you should abort people that might end up in horrible circumstances?
2 points I'd like to specify here. First is that I don't get why you would oppose Trent's point here. You're also protecting 20-week-old fetuses for their future experience. You say that you protect them because of the existence of consciousness, but that's not really true. Because at the beginning of the video, you say...
But the thing that we're interested in protecting is the human conscious experience. Whenever we talk about a person, we're not usually talking about a body or a collection of cells. We're talking about some other conscious sentient being. Whenever we're talking about pain, suffering, harm, happiness, joy, any of these emotions, we're usually talking about somebody that can experience them as such.
But the fetus cannot experience any of that. Take pain, which is the most visceral experience and that requires the least amount of consciousness, to put it like that. It's an entry-level feature, if you will. As you can see here, pain receptors develop in the brain at the 7-week mark and link to the brain by 15 weeks. Does this mean that the 15-week fetuses can feel pain? Who knows? However, the current consensus is that they feel pain at the 24-25-week mark. But there's no telling if they experience it the same way adults do. Also, it seems like fetuses can only begin to distinguish between a harmless and a painful touch late into the 3rd trimester, which is pretty much close to the 40-week mark or the end of the pregnancy. We don't even need to mention sadness, happiness, joy, and whatever else you mentioned there, because the fetus cannot experience any of that. So, in reality, by protecting the 20-week-old fetus, you're actually protecting a future experience. You have the same position Trent has. This is the first point. The second point is the blatant red herring. Trent's position is that you should not kill people, and your counter is, what about self-defense cases? Well, self-defense cases are exceptions, and we'll discuss those separately. I think Trent was discussing the norm, which doesn't tackle exceptions like, oh, what if the baby is Satan's child coming to destroy the world? Wait, I don't even need to think that's what he means. He actually says that's what he means.
So I don't think that it shows all killing is wrong, but I think it shows many, many acts of killing in general are wrong.
This means that even if you do win the argument and make Trent agree with you that in those cases abortion would be justified, you've realistically won nothing because the rule stands. And so does his point. Okay, we're done with the warm-up. Let's see what Destiny has to say about morality, because I think this is a juicy point.
So immoral is kind of, in a way, begging the question of which moral system we're using. Obviously, insofar as theirs were concerned, it wasn't. For me personally, I don't believe in any sort of like moral realism. I don't believe in any kind of like moral fact. So I don't think I could evaluate from some objective frame of reference, this thing is absolutely morally correct or this thing is absolutely morally incorrect.
Just to get this out of the way, Destiny uses the word absolutely here, but I have no idea what he means by that. We're discussing whether morality is objective, not absolute, because one is not like the other. The way I understand it, if morality was to be absolute, it would mean that a given moral rule would be unchangeable to the end of times, no matter the circumstance or context, which doesn't apply. For instance, it may be immoral to give 2-year-olds bleach to drink today because that will obviously kill them. But it may be moral in a hypothetical world where the human body functions differently and needs bleach to survive. So, in this sense, morality is by no means absolute. The argument is whether morality is objective, and I'm not sure whether Destiny acknowledges the distinction between these two notions because he also says that there's no moral fact to observe, which would imply that you can only call a fact that which has been proven absolutely. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't believe that. So instead, I think he used the word absolutely here in a colloquial sense, something like definitively, pretty much with the meaning of objective. Okay, so this should settle it, right? According to Destiny, there's no moral fact to be observed or deduced when it comes to morality. Keep that in mind as you listen to the following point.
Without getting ultra fundamental, I think that probably every constructed human moral system on the planet agrees that we're all probably afforded a negative right to life, that for somebody to infringe on our right to life requires a big hurdle to surmount, right? So as long as all of us are humans, as long as we're all social creatures and we've all got some agreement to live and work and exist with one another, that negative right to life ought to be protected.
Okay, Destiny, my man. I want you to listen to me very carefully because this is important. You've just stated an objective moral fact. Well, objective moral fact is a tautology, but you know what I mean. So you've presented an ought based on 1. Human nature. We're all humans, we're social animals, we prefer life over death, etc. And 2, a social contract, aka we agree to live, work, and coexist in peace to improve our chances of survival and boost our well-being. These factors turn your ought into a moral fact. Here's a clearer reiteration. We want to live and thrive in a human society. We agree to create societies where we can live and thrive. Therefore, we ought to protect the right to life as a minimum requirement. The conclusion is objective. It is a moral fact, in the sense that if you wish to create a peaceful and thriving society, at a minimum you must have the right to life as a general rule. I've discussed this point with many people over the years, and here are some of the objections I got. Yeah, but that's not an objective moral fact, so long as the foundation is subjective. The foundation is created by humans, which makes it subjective. So whatever lies on top of it is also subjective, the foundation being the first 2 premises. I want to make 2 points. I don't think that those premises are subjective because those drives are ingrained in us before we're even born. The will to live and to coexist in peace with other humans are not personal preferences or opinions. They are born drives which describe our survival instinct and social nature. And you cannot have a human society without, at a minimum, the will to live and the will to coexist in peace with others. It can be done. Even a group of people that live completely separated from others and who operate based on the rule, kill everyone outside of our group, base their internal social structure on the very same oughts. Despite their radical attitude towards those outside of the group, they agree to live in peace and thrive within their group nonetheless. Plus, even if our preference for life along with our social contract are all subjective, any moral oughts that derive from those are still objective. Let's look at chess to better understand the concept. Wait, this is the wrong image. Hang on. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so we have chess. Then we have the chess rules, which are entirely subjective because we made them up. And these represent the is part. These include everything from how different pieces move to who goes first, what it takes to win the game, and so on. Then you have the goal, which is to win the game. The goal is also subjective. But once we've established this subjective system, the odds, which are the moves you must take towards the goal of winning, are objective. There are objectively bad and good moves in chess, even if the game itself is entirely subjective with entirely subjective rules, which we can change at any time. Almost the exact same applies to morality, where we have the natural human tendencies as the is part. Then we have the goal, which is to preserve well-being, which at a minimum refers to life, health, happiness, individual freedom, and so on. And finally, we have the oughts, which are the actions to take to achieve the said goal. In this system, these actions are objectively moral or immoral based on whether they support or violate our goal. You may have noticed that in the beginning I said that almost the exact same applies to morality. The difference between morality and chess is that I consider the foundation of morality, aka the human's natural tendency to self-preservation, to be objective, as I've already explained. Objection 2. Morality is subjective simply because a given moral ought doesn't apply in all possible scenarios. This objection conflates objective with absolute. In other words, if a given moral ought is not absolute, it means it's also not objective, which doesn't follow because, as I've explained, absolute and objective are two very different notions. To make it even clearer, let's take chess again. Peon c6 to c7 is an objectively good move here because it results in checkmate. But the same move is no longer objectively good if rook is b7 instead of b8. Because it's not objectively good with rook on b7, does this mean it's also not objectively good with rook on b8? No, because we have two different situations, two different paradigms with two different conclusions. Peon c6 to c7 is objectively good in some situations, not all possible situations. There's no contradiction here if you understand the difference between objective and absolute. Objection 3. Morality is not objective because not everybody agrees to the same moral oughts. This has always been a weird one to me. You don't say it's not an objective fact that the Earth is a spheroid because not everybody agrees it is. You also don't say peon c6 to c7, it's not an objectively good move because not everybody agrees it is. So why do you say it when it comes to moral oughts? Is it because you believe that the Earth's shape and the outcome of a given chess move can be proven empirically, whereas the objective moral value of an ought cannot? In that case, you are wrong. Because once I have the goal of forming a stable and thriving society, I can prove that the statement everyone ought to have the right to life is objectively true in relation to the goal. Because you cannot have a human society that doesn't value its citizens' right to life. The right to life is a must, and so is this ought. So it doesn't really matter that some people don't agree with one objective ought, just as it doesn't matter what people think about the Earth's shape. I didn't intend to make this video exclusively about morality, so I'll stop the moral talk here for now. But this is one topic that could spark hours of analysis and discussion. Maybe for a next vid. Let's close the morality segment with yet another Destiny-specific banger.
As far as I'm aware, I don't believe that we have any organs to allow us to perceive any sort of moral fact in the world. So I think that moral systems are invented by people.
The notion of moral fact refers to a value assessment, not an empirical object that you can see, weigh, and measure. And the organ you're referring to is your brain capable of making that assessment. So, in this sense, we do have an organ to perceive and assess moral facts. What Destiny is doing here is conflate the notion of fact with that of empirical object, which you can measure and weigh. But by this definition, we also don't have logical or mathematical facts, despite those facts being objectively true and testable. So this means that they don't exist because we don't have an organ to perceive them, right? Except we do. Okay, so we're done with this. Let's get back to abortion and go through several of the most glaring logical fallacies I've identified in Destiny's speech. I have quite a few of them.
Just because two people disagree over something doesn't necessarily mean there's an objective fact of the matter, right?
I agree, but
Okay.
also it doesn't follow that just because people disagree that there is no objective fact.
Well, no, I never used that, though. What I said was the inability to reconcile a disagreement means that there might not be an objective fact.
Or there might be. It's just that we're currently unable to discover it. How did you eliminate this possibility so that you can embrace the opposite one, is what I want to know.
But morality, we can't perceive. We just have how we feel about it. And I don't think it's a satisfying answer for a lot of people.
And I would just say if that were true, there's really no point in us talking about this at all right now. Like, you'd have to say, like, is it an objective fact that the state should allow women to have abortions?
Is it an objective fact that the state should? Well, that should is doing a lot of work there. Should, with regards to my purported morals, I would say yes, it is, that they should be allowed to have an abortion.
Well, it's not objective. You're just saying, I would really
we can
like
have shoulds without them being objective, right? Or no?
No. not when you're trying to convince other people that your opinion is the correct one, especially when you want your opinion to become law. You can't just say, the state should do this because I believe that that's good, without explaining why you believe it's good. And by doing so, you're creating a justification for your opinion that we can test and check to see if it's true. This turns your subjective statement into an objective one, aka my opinion is that the state should allow for abortions because. The because part is the objective statement that we're testing to see if it's true. You need to have an objective frame of reference if you want to prove to someone that your stance is the correct one and convince them of such. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't claim that when it comes to morality, everything comes down to opinions, and at the same time claim that your opinion is the right one. Your opinion is the right one based on what? Your opinion? Yeah, well done.
But I think my view better aligns with most people's intuitions that the death of a human embryo or fetus is far, far different morally than the death of an ovum.
But they're not valuing that fetus, they're valuing what it would become. And again, I agree with what you're saying, but I think that you're skipping over really important steps. If I steal $10,000 from somebody, did I steal $100,000 from them? If somebody loses a fetus, they might feel bad because now they're missing the child that could have been.
Ah, yes. Destiny analogies. This analogy would work better if Destiny would actually understand it. The fetus will 100% develop consciousness. The $10,000 in your analogy is the fetus. The $100,000 is the consciousness. Knowing this, the analogy then becomes, if I steal $10,000 from someone who has it in the bank and where we know for sure that they will turn into $100,000 in 9 months, did I steal $100,000? With this new data, the answer then becomes, for all intents and purposes, yes. You've stolen $10,000 and prevented the person from gaining an extra of $90,000, which we know with 100% certainty that they would have gotten, if it wasn't for your steely actions. Also, they're not losing the child it could have been, but the child it would have been, because we're arguing aborting perfectly viable fetuses that we know for a fact will reach term. It seems like Destiny cannot win an argument without heavy reframing and red herrings, which actually means he isn't winning anything.
I believe that something is an organism if you can give it time, nutrition, and a proper environment, and it has the capacity to develop into a mature member of a species. And it only needs those three things: time, nutrition, proper environment. That's why sperm and egg and cancer cells, they are body parts. You give them time, nutrients, and environment, they'll always be that same type of thing. They cannot develop.
It depends on how we define environment, right? Because a sperm put in the environment of an egg will eventually join and become, as it grows with inside the womb, into something like a human eventually, right?
Right.
So Trent is saying that the embryo is different than its parts, the sperm and the egg, by virtue of being able to grow and change, whereas its parts cannot. And Destiny's comeback is that those parts can too grow and change if you unite them. Yeah, but when you do that, you obtain a fucking embryo. That was Trent's point too, that those parts cannot grow and change on their own. They need each other to create an embryo, and it's the embryo that grows and changes. Once they unite, you no longer have a sperm and an egg that do the growing, but an embryo.
But I would say that when the sperm and the egg combine, the sperm and egg no longer exist anymore.
See? You can't counter Trent's point by agreeing with him. It's not how disagreeing works. Just saying.
What's more different? The one sperm and the one egg to the zygote, or the zygote to the 9-month fetus?
I see what you're doing here. Don't think I don't see what you're doing. You're comparing these things based on how they look. So, from your perspective, the zygote is closer to the sperm and the egg because they look more similarly, compared to the zygote and the 9-month baby. which is, on the one hand, hypocritical because you've been against Trent's intuition pumping.
Although I would fight the framing of this because child is intuition pumping, the idea that it's a fully formed, developed human.
And I guess
although again, I would fight on the optics framing because when you say newborn, we're intuition pumping a normal, healthy 9-month fetus, kind of. Although again, I'm going to fight because when you say newly born human beings, you're intuition pumping a normal, healthy.
What do you mean?
Every time you could, but I guess it's okay if you use it now. On the second hand, Trent isn't differentiating between the zygote and the egg and sperm based on looks, but based on substance. Trent's point is that the zygote is a being. The sperm and the egg are not. They need to unite to become a being. This makes the zygote closer conceptually to the 9th-month baby. And it's not even that they're close. They're the exact same thing at different stages of development.
No, but I'm saying that the point you're making, I don't see how it shows that the embryo is not a person or doesn't have moral value just because
I'm just
humans
saying,
at
because
that stage are
you have a
needy.
strange definition of time, nutrition, and proper environment, and then you are drawing an arbitrary border around.
I'm saying that's what makes something an organism.
Yeah, but we're not arguing over something being an organism or not, right? We're arguing over when something gets personhood. You can argue that a sperm or an egg on its own will never develop into anything. The sperm or the egg need an egg or a sperm. Mm-hmm. However, the fetus will never develop into anything. It needs the sustenance from the mother, right?
No,
So
here's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that something is an organism if you can give it time, nutrition, and a proper environment, and it has the capacity to develop into a mature member of a species. However,
that's great, but that's entirely arbitrary.
Why?
Because
It's a definition of an organism. It's different. That's why sperm and egg and cancer cells, they are body parts. You give them time, nutrients, and environment, they'll always be that same type of thing. They cannot develop.
What do you think is more different, a sperm or a one-celled organism from a 9-month baby?
The overall topic of the debate might be discussing the notion of personhood, but the specific argument you two were engaging at this particular point in the debate was what is an organism. So you're just lying. You lost the argument, so you chose to lie and change the goalpost to
discombobulate
Trent and divert attention from the fact that you have no counter-argument. Just shameful.
I just think that some of these intuitions that you're hitting at, for taking such a solid, I guess, realist position on morality, it feels like we can find, even fundamentally, somebody could argue, for instance, in the animal world, if, I think I saw a video of a cheetah where when the babies are born, they lick them, they try to get them to kind of like move, and sometimes the baby can't move, so the cheetah will just abandon the baby and walk away.
Right.
So who's to say if a person says, well, I think intuitively, if a kid can't walk, then the kid isn't entitled to anything. If a child can't walk, then you leave them. What if somebody comes at you with an intuition like that? Say there's a tribe where those intuitions exist. How do you figure out whose intuition is correct?
It's okay for the cheetah to act that way because the natural state of the cheetah babies is to move. It's unnatural for the baby not to move, so the cheetah's intuition is that if it doesn't move, there's something wrong with it and it won't survive. By leaving it, the cheetah is actually doing a good thing because it can use its energy to care for its healthy babies. So, the cheetah's act of leaving its faulty baby is in the interest of itself and its family as a whole. But the same doesn't apply to humans. The human baby's natural state is not to walk. And there could be no tribe to hold the intuition of discarding the baby that doesn't walk, because no babies do. So that tribe would end up discarding all of their newborns, no exception, effectively terminating the tribe's bloodline entirely. So the answer to your question of how do you know whose intuition is correct is that which preserves the well-being of humans and society. If a society discards babies that cannot walk, that goes against the well-being of the babies and the society as a whole, because that society will cease to exist.
So you think that a human newborn is more intelligent, let's say like a chimpanzee?
Intelligent is not the right word.
Or more aware of the world?
More having a human conscious experience than the
All you're
monkey.
saying is it's more of a genetic human being. That's true, but so what? If that's what makes you valuable, then all genetic human beings need to be valuable.
The human
part is doing all the work in your argument.
Well, of course, because I value humans and human life.
Too.
Yeah.
What? No, you don't. Your entire position is that you couldn't care less about human life. You care about human consciousness. It's only the fact that human consciousness only exists in a living human being that makes you also value human life, but that's incidentally, right? If you would have valued human life instead of consciousness, you would have protected the pre-20-week-old fetus too, but you don't.
Yes, then
all you're saying is it's more of a genetic human being. That's true, but so what? If that's what makes you valuable, then all genetic human beings need to be valuable.
The human
part is doing all the work in your argument.
Well, of course, because I value humans and human life.
Too.
Yeah. So it's doing a lot for both of our arguments. And genetics is our definition of human is a certain genetic code. Right. So of course, the human conscious experience is necessarily going to be deployed by a genetic human, right?
Man, I gotta say, you're making a great argument for why we should protect humans before developing consciousness. Because human consciousness, which is what you're valuing, can only appear in a human, right? I'm not sure if Destiny's shift here is the result of Trent's arguments or Destiny's own shaky foundation causing him to look for artificial ways to keep it steady. Even if that means agreeing with Trent's core points but making it look like he doesn't.
Do you think that people in persistent vegetative states, assuming you know they're never going to wake up, should they be kept alive indefinitely as well?
Again with this stupid analogy, which I've already tackled in my first video. The goal here is to have Trent say no, to which the reply then is, so you don't care about human life but about human consciousness. Okay, but even if Trent were to admit that, do you understand that his pro-life position remains unchanged? Because killing a pre-20-week-old fetus that we know will reach term and develop consciousness destroys that possibility. So, aborting the fetus goes against the idea of protecting the fetus's human consciousness. That, again, we know for a fact will develop. So Trent could be okay with killing the vegetative patient because he knows consciousness will never return. But he's also okay protecting the pre-20-week-old fetus because he knows with the same certainty that consciousness will arrive. This analogy does nothing for you.
Bring up the dictionary we want, but...
And I would say an organism is a collection of parts that work together for the good of the whole. A corpse no longer has that property.
Okay, but I mean, neither does a single-cell organism. It can't work to do anything, absent
how does it grow in the womb?
By getting nutrients from the mother. The mother's body is probably doing more at that point.
But that's the same as you and I. When we go to In-N-Out and we eat food, we got to do that to keep growing and develop. It doesn't have to be In-N-Out, but we need nutrients and environment to continue developing also.
Yeah, but I think there's a bit of a difference. When I eat a cheeseburger, my body doesn't become a cheeseburger, but a single-cell organism is literally one single cell. The nutrients coming in from the mother more than even the sum of everything existing.
If you're confused, let me lay out Destiny's argument in writing so you can see it with your own two eyes. A corpse no longer has the property of developing, which is the same as a single-celled organism, because the single-celled organism relies on the mother's nutrients to survive. And this is different than adult humans consuming nutrients because us eating cheeseburgers doesn't turn us into cheeseburgers, while the single-celled organism receives more nutrients than its overall mass. Makes all the sense in the world if you ask me. At this point, I'm confident Destiny knows what he's doing. Since I can't leave it unanswered, Trent is saying that corpses no longer have the capacity to grow and develop, while Destiny claims that single-celled organisms are the same because they cannot grow and develop without nutrients from the mother, which is what defines every living organism in the world. None can survive without a form of nutrients. However, this doesn't include corpses, because by definition, the notion of surviving no longer applies to them, no matter how many nutrients you would feed them. When it comes to the cheeseburger bit, I think what Destiny is trying to say there is...
Pardon? Come again.
So at this point, there's still approximately 1 hour left in the debate, but I need to stop here. I'm sure there are plenty of other stupid arguments to go through, but you'll have to check that for yourself. To throw my thoughts into the mix, overall, I don't agree with Trent's anti-abortion position and stance on morality because he bases them on divine commandments, which are taken based on faith instead of explained and justified. I also don't agree with Destiny's semi-pro-life, semi-pro-abortion stance or his morality take because he bases them on...
Because I say so.
In the spirit of today's vid, to use an analogy, it's like asking Trent to build me a home and he comes up with the most gorgeous villa with 3 stories, an outdoor pool and a tennis field. But he builds it on quicksands, so I can't really live in it. I ask the same of Destiny and he draws this on a piece of paper and wipes his ass with it.